A single email can unravel a decade of trust. And as I stood in the gleaming marble lobby of Chicago's Willis Tower, my phone's soft chime delivered just such a blow. My name is Chloe Davis. And at 32, I had carved a formidable path as the CEO of Veritas Capital, a corporate restructuring firm that turned failing enterprises into empires. I was moments away from sealing a multi-million-dollar partnership that would redefine the fintech landscape across North America. Yet, in that instant, the world I had so carefully constructed trembled not from a faltering deal, but from a betrayal so intimate, it stole my breath. What could my parents have done to fracture the foundation of the life I had built? And how could they not see the storm they had unleashed? The day had begun with the kind of crisp Chicago morning that sharpens the senses. I had arrived at the Willis Tower at dawn. My tailored charcoal suit, a silent testament to the authority I wielded. The fintech deal was the culmination of months of negotiations. A partnership that would position Veritas Capital as a titan in the industry. My team and I had spent hours in a glass-walled conference room, dissecting contracts and forecasting synergies. The German CEO across the table had nodded approvingly as I outlined our integration strategy, his handshake firm with respect. He had advised Fortune 500 boards, salvaged brands from collapse, and recovered billions in assets. My reputation was one of quiet precision. A woman who spoke softly, but reshaped markets with every word. As the meeting adjourned, I stepped into the lobby to review my notes, the marble floor echoing under my heels. My phone buzzed. A notification I assumed was a follow-up from my assistant. Instead, the subject line of an email from my mother stopped me. Cold, the house is sold. My heart plummeted. A visceral lurch that left me momentarily unmoored. I opened the message, my eyes scanning the words as if they might rearrange themselves into something less devastating. We got a strong offer. Far better than the small down payment you contributed. My mother wrote, so, we accepted. It's all signed. Done. Each sentence was a blade, slicing through the life I had built. The house in question was no mere property. It was my sanctuary. A 3-bedroom craftsman in Atlanta's Virginia Highland neighborhood. For 5 years, I had poured myself into it. Every mortgage payment, every renovation, every insurance premium had come from my earnings. I had sanded the oak floors myself, chosen the slate tiles for the kitchen, and planted hydrangeas along the front walk. It was the physical embodiment of my independence, a testament to what I had achieved despite my family's doubts. Yet, my parents had insisted on keeping the deed in their names. Just until you're more settled. Sweetheart, my father had said, his tone patronizing even then. I had trusted them. A decision that now felt like a misstep in a chess game I hadn't known I was playing. I reread the email, my fingers trembling against the screen. The lobby's grandeur faded. The chatter of executives and the hum of elevators receding into a distant blur. 5 years of payments. Countless hours of labor. And they had sold it without a word. I was 0 miles from Atlanta, on the cusp of a career-defining moment, and my parents had dismantled my home as if it were a trivial asset. The email's casual dismissal stung most. You're always so busy with that advisory firm of yours. My advisory firm had just secured a deal that would generate millions in revenue. Yet to them, it was a footnote. Unworthy of respect. I stepped toward a quiet alcove, the weight of my leather briefcase grounding me. My parents' decision wasn't just about the house. It was a continuation of a lifelong pattern. Growing up in their suburban Atlanta home, I had been the overlooked daughter. My ambitions overshadowed by my brother Marcus, their golden child. While Marcus was groomed for Barton & Co., the family's logistics firm, I was told to be practical, to marry well, to leave business to men. Every achievement I earned my MBA. My first client. My firm's first major acquisition met with their indifference or outright skepticism. The house had been my defiance, a tangible proof of my worth. And now it was gone. I closed my eyes. The Chicago skyline visible through the lobby's towering windows. The deal awaited my signature upstairs. But this betrayal demanded a response. I dialed my mother's number. My voice steady despite the storm within. The call went to voicemail. Her cheerful greeting, a mockery of the moment. I hung up. The silence louder than any words. In that instant, I knew this was more than a loss, it was a catalyst. My parents had underestimated me for the last time, and though they didn't yet know it, their actions had set in motion a reckoning that would redefine everything. The Chicago alcove where I stood felt like a confessional. The weight of my mother's voicemail lingering like an unanswered prayer. The betrayal of my home's sale was not an isolated wound, but a thread in a tapestry of disregard woven through my life. I forced myself to breathe. The city's pulse beyond the glass, a reminder of the empire I had built, despite my family's indifference. Yet, the sting of their actions demanded I confront the past, to understand why they so easily dismissed what I had earned. As I gripped my phone, I resolved to call again, knowing the conversation would unearth old scars, but propel me toward a reckoning they could not foresee. I dialed my mother's number once more. And this time, she answered. "Chloe. Darling," she chirped, her voice bright with a practiced warmth that grated against my raw nerves. "Did you see our email? Such a relief to get that sale finalized." Her nonchalance was a blade, twisting deeper. "That was my home," I replied, my tone measured but edged with steel. "You sold it without even a call." A sigh crackled through the line. "Oh, don't be so theatrical. Your father and I needed the funds. Barton & Co. has hit a rough patch. And you're always jetting around with that little consulting business of yours." The phrase, "little consulting business," landed like a slap. Reducing Veritas Capital, a firm that had just swayed a Chicago boardroom to a child's hobby. Her words echoed a lifetime of minimization. In our Atlanta home, where family dinners were more audit than affectionate, my aspirations were met with patronizing smiles. My father, a man of stern directives, would lecture about the logistics industry's demands, his eyes fixed on Marcus, who nodded eagerly at every word. Marcus, my brother, was the heir apparent. His every venture from a failed startup to his current role as Barton & Co. COO met with unwavering parental pride. I, meanwhile, was urged to pursue sensible paths, a teaching degree, perhaps, or a husband with a steady income. When I announced my acceptance to business school, my mother's response was a tight-lipped, "Well, don't expect us to pay for it." They hadn't. I had funded every credit through scholarships and late-night shifts. The memory of one particular slight burned brightest. At 22, I had pitched a cost-saving strategy for Barton & Co. My research meticulous, my numbers airtight. My father had chuckled, dismissing it as cute, while Marcus smirked and changed the subject. That night, I vowed to build something they couldn't ignore. Yet, even as Veritas Capital grew, securing contracts that rivaled their firm's revenue, their perception of me remained frozen, a dreamer overreaching her place. The house sale was merely the latest proof my sacrifices, my equity, my stability, all expendable to prop up their faltering legacy. "Where am I supposed to live now?" I asked, my voice low but unwavering. My mother's reply was breezy. "Oh, come home. Chloe, your old bedroom's just as you left it. It'll be like old times." The suggestion was a time capsule to a past I had fought to escape, a room wallpapered with expectations I never met, where my trophies were overshadowed by Marcus's framed accolades. Old times meant being the afterthought, the one asked to answer phones during their crises. While my ambitions were sidelined, Barton & Co. is rough patch, I knew, was more than a hiccup. Whispers of their missed payments and supplier disputes had reached my industry contacts. They had gambled my home to delay an inevitable collapse. I ended the call abruptly. The silence in the alcove, amplifying my clarity. My parents saw me as a footnote in their story. But I was writing my own. The Chicago skyline stretched before me. A canvas of possibility. I had built Veritas Capital from nothing. And now, their betrayal had ignited a purpose beyond personal success. As I returned to the conference room, the weight of my briefcase felt like a promise. They had sold my home, but they would soon learn the cost of underestimating me. The Chicago conference room awaited my return, its glass walls reflecting the resolve that now burned within me. My mother's dismissive words echoed, but they were no longer a wound, they were fuel. As I crossed the threshold, the weight of my family's betrayal sharpened my focus. For 18 months, I had woven a clandestine tapestry of strategy, one that would soon ensnare Barton & Co. In a web of my design, the sale of my home was not just a personal affront, it was the final miscalculation that would propel my plan into motion. I was no longer the daughter they overlooked. I was the architect of their reckoning, seated at the polished mahogany table. I faced my team and the fintech executives, their eyes expectant. The contract before me was more than a partnership. It was a stepping stone to a larger ambition. As I signed my name, the ink seemed to pulse with purpose. My assistant, Claire, handed me a dossier marked confidential. Its contents a blueprint for Barton & Co. Its downfall. I leaned toward Lucas Hoffman, my Chicago-based legal counsel, whose sharp intellect had been instrumental in my covert maneuvers. Is everything in place for the audit? I asked. My voice low, steady. He nodded, a glint of admiration in his eyes. By Friday, Veritas Capital will hold 78% of Barton & Co.'s equity. The debt consolidation is complete. The plan had begun as a contingency, a response to whispers of Barton & Co.'s financial distress that reached me through industry channels. Over 18 months, I had orchestrated a silent siege, using a labyrinth of shell companies to acquire their overdue invoices and defaulted loans. Each missed payment, each desperate renegotiation with suppliers, had been a thread I quietly gathered. My parents believed I ran a modest consultancy. In truth, Veritas Capital was a predator, specializing in the acquisition of distressed assets. We didn't merely save companies, we reshaped them, sometimes dismantling them for profit. Barton & Co., with its bloated overhead and mismanaged contracts, it was ripe for the taking. My phone vibrated. A text from Marcus. Mom told you about the house? Tough call. But business is business. The phrase was a family mantra, used to justify every slight. From diverting my college fund to Marcus's ventures, to now liquidating my home, I typed a single word in response. Understood. Let him think I was acquiescent, licking wounds over a lost house. He had no inkling of the storm I was unleashing. I turned to Claire. Book me a flight to Atlanta. Tomorrow morning. I instructed. First class. Direct. The city where my family's empire teetered would be the stage for my revelation. As I gathered my documents, Lucas lingered. His voice, a conspiratorial murmur. This is more than a takeover. Isn't it? I met his gaze, allowing a rare flicker of vulnerability. They took my home. Lucas, now I'll take theirs. He nodded, understanding the personal stakes. The deal in Chicago was secured. But my true victory lay 700 miles south, where Barton & Co.'s boardroom awaited. My family had underestimated me for years, but their ignorance was my greatest asset. As I exited the room, the Chicago skyline gleamed, a silent witness to the power I wielded and the justice I would claim. Atlanta's skyline greeted me as my plane descended, its steel spires a stark contrast to the personal battle I was about to wage. The city held memories of my family's dismissal, but now it was my battleground. Settling into a penthouse overlooking Peachtree Street, I ignored the barrage of calls and emails from my parents and Marcus. Their attempts to placate me were futile. I was no longer the daughter they could pacify with hollow apologies. Each unanswered message fueled my preparation. As I honed the final details of Veritas Capital's takeover, the boardroom confrontation loomed, and I was crafting a performance that would leave no room for their denial. My days blurred into a symphony of strategy. In a sleek office suite, leased for Veritas Capital, I met with auditors and analysts, dissecting Barton & Co.'s financials. Their balance sheets were a litany of errors, overleveraged loans, unpaid vendors, and a payroll bloated by nepotism. My team's reports confirmed what I had long suspected: my father's arrogance and Marcus's incompetence had driven the company to the brink. I issued directives with precision, ensuring every legal and financial lever was in place. By acquiring their debt, I had secured a controlling interest, and the board members, weary of my family's mismanagement, were primed to align with me. Each morning, I stood before my penthouse mirror, transforming into the woman my family never saw. My navy blazer, tailored to perfection, was armor. My hair, pinned with meticulous care. A crown. The reflection was no longer the overlooked daughter, but a force of calculated resolve. I rehearsed my boardroom entrance, each word a weapon honed for impact. My family's obliviousness was my advantage. They believed I was nursing wounds over a house, not orchestrating their professional demise. Arriving at Barton & Co.'s headquarters in Buckhead, I was greeted by a security guard. His nod, subtle but telling. He was one of several employees now on Veritas Capital's payroll, a silent network I had cultivated. The building's glass facade gleamed, a monument to my father's pride, yet its halls whispered of decline. As I approached the boardroom, my family's voices carried through the oak doors. My mother's forced laughter mingled with my father's gruff complaints about an anonymous firm seizing control. Marcus's voice, tinged with panic, cited figures I knew better than he did. They were unaware that the CEO they feared was steps away, her briefcase heavy with their fate. I paused outside the door, my pulse steady despite the gravity of the moment. The boardroom was a stage, and I was its director. My family's underestimation had given me years to build in silence, to amass power they couldn't fathom. Tomorrow, I will walk through those doors, not as their daughter, but as their superior. The thought sent a shiver of anticipation through me. Atlanta's humid air pressed against the windows, but within me, a cold clarity reigned. The takeover was no longer a plan, it was a promise. One I would deliver with the precision of a blade. The oak doors of Barton & Co.'s boardroom loomed before me, their polished surface, a final barrier between my family's illusions and the truth I carried. My pause outside was not hesitation, but a moment to savor the precipice of justice. 18 months of silent strategy had led to this. And as I adjusted my blazer's cuffs, I felt the weight of every slight my family had inflicted. Their voices, my father's bluster, my mother's brittle laughter, Marcus's anxious calculations spilled through the door, unaware that their world was about to shift. I pushed the doors open, stepping into the room not as their daughter, but as the architect of their reckoning. Every head turned, the air thickening with confusion. My father's face darkened, his voice sharp. "Chloe, this is a board meeting. Your grievances about the house can wait." His dismissal was predictable, a reflex honed by years of overlooking me. I advanced, my heels a deliberate cadence on the hardwood, and placed my leather briefcase on the table with a resonant click. "I'm precisely where I need to be," I said, my tone calm but unyielding. "The CEO of Veritas Capital is scheduled to address you at 10 o'clock. That would be me." Silence gripped the room, broken only by the shatter of my mother's glass, water pooling on the floor like her unraveling composure. My father's complexion turned ashen, his hands gripping the table's edge. Marcus stared, mouth agape, as if I had conjured myself from thin air. "That's impossible," he stammered. "You run some small-time consultancy." He tilted my heel, a faint smile curling my lips. "Small time, let me clarify." I opened my briefcase, extracting a sheaf of documents and sliding them across the table. Veritas Capital now holds 78% of Barton & Co.'s equity. I control the majority of board seats. As of this morning, I am your superior. My father snatched the papers, his trembling fingers betraying his disbelief. This is a stunt, he growled. You can't what I interjected. My voice, a blade. Outmaneuver you. Outthink you. Outgrow the box you tried to keep me in. I leaned forward, meeting his gaze. You sold my home to prop up this sinking ship. You drained my savings for Marcus's failures. You called my ambitions a distraction while I built a firm that now owns yours. My mother's voice broke through, quivering. We did it for the company. Chloe, for our legacy. I turned to her, unflinching. Your legacy is a ledger of mismanagement. Look around. This company is mine now. The board members, long chafing under my family's hubris, watched with barely concealed satisfaction. I pressed on, my words deliberate, effective immediately. Marcus, you are relieved as COO. Father, you're stepping down as CEO. Mother, your role in communications is terminated. Marcus sputtered, his face reddening. You're firing your own family, the irony was rich. And I let it linger. Not firing, I corrected. Offering opportunity. I opened a personnel folder, my tone almost conversational. Marcus, we have an entry-level position in accounts receivable. Father, our new distribution hub needs sales reps. Door to door. Mother, the reception desk could use your charm. My mother's hands flew to her face, tears spilling. My father's voice cracked. You ungrateful, I raised a hand, silencing him. Careful, you're addressing your boss. Before turning to leave, I delivered the final blow. Oh. And the house you sold, I acquired the development firm that bought it. The deed will be mine again by tomorrow. Their expressions, shock laced with dawning horror, were a tableau of poetic justice. I addressed the board. My authority, absolute. We reconvene tomorrow at 9. Prepare your departmental reports. With a final glance at my family, I added, those still employed? That is. I exited, the doors swinging shut behind me, sealing their stunned silence within. The boardroom doors closed, and the echo of my heels on the marble corridor was a clarion of victory. Behind me, my family's unraveling, my mother's sobs, my father's furious mutterings. Marcus's mute disbelief faded into irrelevance. For the first time, their chaos could not touch me. I stepped into the executive elevator, its brass walls reflecting a woman transformed. The Barton & Co. logo, etched above the buttons, was no longer their emblem but mine to redefine. As the door slid shut, I felt the weight of my triumph settle, a foundation for the future I would build. In my father's former office, now mine, I settled into the leather chair, the Atlanta skyline framing my reflection in the glass. Sunlight spilled across the desk, illuminating a newspaper headline, Veritas Capital seizes Barton & Co. In boardroom coup, the phrase unknown CEO drew a quiet laugh. Unknown to them, perhaps, but every step, every late-night analysis, every calculated acquisition had been deliberate. My anonymity had been my shield, allowing me to strike while they dismissed me as inconsequential. Now, their empire was my canvas. I picked up my phone, dialing my real estate agent. Glada. List the Virginia Highland property. I instructed. Market price. No, concessions. The house, reclaimed through my purchase of the development firm, was no longer a home but a symbol of control. Selling it was not sentimentality's defeat, but a declaration I needed no relics of their betrayal to define me. As I hung up, a text from Lucas Hoffman arrived. Congratulations. Chloe, how did it feel? I smiled. Typing. Like rewriting history. The boardroom had been my stage, But this office was where I would reshape Barton & Co. into something enduring. My gaze fell on a framed photo my father had left behind, a family portrait from years ago. My face half-shadowed beside Marcus's grin. I set it aside, replacing it with a blank notepad. Their legacy was finished. Mine was just beginning. Yet, as I surveyed the office, a broader purpose stirred. My journey was not just about reclaiming what was taken. It was about proving that worth is forged, not bestowed. I thought of others who, like me, had been diminished by those closest to them, their potential buried under doubt. To you, reading this, I extend an invitation. Share your story. Have you been sidelined by family? Your dreams dismissed as folly? Have you built in silence? Your triumphs unseen by those who should have cheered loudest? Your experiences matter. Not just to you, but to others who need to know they are not alone. Leave a comment. A whisper of your resilience? To remind us all that strength need not shout to be heard. Your quiet victories are as powerful as any boardroom coup. If my path resonates, consider subscribing. Not merely to follow my story, but to join a chorus of voices that champion the overlooked. My triumph is not vengeance's end, but purpose's beginning. You owe no one proof of your potential, only yourself the courage to become what others cannot see. Work diligently. Move strategically. And when the moment arrives, claim your place with unapologetic certainty. The best victory is not proving them wrong, but becoming the self they never imagined. As I leaned back, the Atlanta breeze whispering through an open window, I knew this was not the end, but a dawn mine to shape, and yours to share. Through the crucible of betrayal, I learned that true power lies not in seeking validation from those who diminish you, but in forging your path with unwavering resolve. My parents' sale of my home and their lifelong underestimation taught me that worth is not bestowed, it is built. By sizing Barton & Co., I realized that resilience, honed in silence, can topple even the most entrenched legacies. The lesson is clear: you owe no one proof of your potential, only yourself. The courage to become the force others fail to see. Claiming your place with unapologetic certainty,